Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Nell.
Great to be back in the studio.
It sure is.
Before we get started today, and I have a really chilling, horrible, interesting case, especially interesting from a legal perspective.
Excellent.
You're going to like it for its legal perspective. You're going to really hate the details. It is a child death case that I'm bringing you today, but it was recommended by a Patreon, and so really, really good recommendation. But before we get started, I want to shout out a couple of people.
Okay.
The first person I'm going to shout out, because this is a Louisiana case by happenstance that we're doing today, and we received the absolute sweetest email from a Louisiana listener.
You know I love my Cajuns.
I know. I mean, very near and dear to our heart.
Absolutely.
But we're going to shout out Valerie from Louisiana.
Hi, Valerie from Louisiana.
I just want to say thank you for your incredibly kind email and for making us smile. She just wrote us the sweetest email. But she did say if I had to have one critique, it would be the new music that we changed in 2023.
So funny, because longtime listeners, you will get used to it, Valerie. We promise.
Yes. She said she started with episode 1.
Me too. I was a fan and before I did this, and I also love the music and was hesitant when we changed too, but with new things comes new music, and I'm the new thing.
I explained to her all the legal reasons why we did that too. And so it was just, I don't know. I just really wanted to shout her out, and it was perfect because we're doing a Louisiana case. So thanks for listening, Val. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for your incredibly kind email. And to all of you guys that email us, really nice things. It seriously does keep us going. Like when I read those emails, I'm like, this is the person that I'm making this podcast for.
And if you give us permission, we sometimes will shout you out.
Yeah, we'll use your name. Yes. Yeah. Then I also need to say thank you we received another, it was just like a whole week of giving, truly, because we got another email that I think is just, Megan, I know that it's going to reiterate to you why we do this work, because it's not like we get rich. You guys know we don't have the big sponsors. We're not making millions off from this podcast. Okay. We make enough to keep it going, to pay for our website and our, things like that. But for the most part, it's a big donation of our time. And we do it
because we like it and we like each other.
Exactly. And because we believe in what we're doing. And this email is going to reiterate this. It says, "Hi guys. First, thank you in general for the podcast and your approach to the social and judicial issues surrounding crime. Second, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the way you talked about sex work and sex workers, particularly when it came to the heinous murder of Roxanne Hayes. If you'll remember, we recently redid that episode from one of our very first episodes.
Yes.
I am extremely sensitive to media that discusses people who do sex work because of lived experience and because it's so hard to find portrayals of sex workers as people who have their own stories, lives, and identities outside of their work. I want to thank you for humanizing Roxanne and for understanding the nuance involved in the broader discussions to engage in sex work. You managed this without pandering or virtue signaling, which was incredibly refreshing. I want to thank you even more for talking about the other aspects of Roxanne's life, having a supportive partner and being a hairdresser and a mother. Those are equally as important to her identity, and hearing you ladies echo my thoughts was a revelation. The passion to discover these aspects of Roxanne's life and the anger that there was not more info on her was deeply appreciated." And I'm not going to say this person's name because I don't have
you're making me well up.
I know. Oh, I bawled. And I let them know that I sat there bawling. Like it was, it just was such a refreshing reiteration for the type of work that we do here, why we do this work, why we say things that, you know, the general population maybe might not understand because of the work that we do. And so it was beautiful. So thank you.
Victims of crimes, very rarely is anything that they did or that defined them at that point in time a justification for what happened to them, whether it's a murder or an assault or anything else. And so sex crimes specifically, we like to bring to the forefront because, again, now, most individuals, as we're aware, aren't doing that job because it's something that they just are really invested in and love to do. It's a necessity to make ends meet.
They're surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we have people who shoplift because they can't feed their families. And are there alternatives? Yes, there are. But if you haven't been in a situation where you've been desperate before, then, you know, you don't judge.
We don't get to judge.
We don't either.
No.
And that even comes from me with my profession. I do judge, but I always take into consideration everything that's in front of me before I render a decision.
And I'm sure, especially coming from being a lawyer, I know coming from being a CPS worker, there were many people, even in my personal lives, who judged me for the work that I did. Okay. So I think all of us can maybe relate to that of like, well, you don't know my story.
Are you talking about when you worked at the Topless Club? No. Oh, no, we're kidding.
If I wasn't as modest as I am, I wish when I was younger that I would have thought of that. Guys, my college would be paid off, man. Like,
Charnell was a doula. Is that what you're referring to? Were people being judgmental about that?
No, when I was a CPS worker.
Oh,
people
God.
judged me for doing that, right? Like, why would you want to work with people who abuse their children? Why? How could you possibly take people's children from them?
I hear that
right?
one. How many times
understand.
did you walk through a store and people who knew you like literally grabbed their kids and moved them to the other side?
Yes. Like you're the Grim Reaper that's coming to just eat their children.
You're the Krampus.
Absolutely.
Taking the children away.
Yep. So people, we don't know. And in as much we never know someone's full story. Even when we try to do as much research as we do on this podcast, we still recognize that we don't know the whole story ever.
And that's why we take constructive criticism and additional information and we redo cases.
Yeah, if necessary. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So well, thank you for our banter, which not everybody loves, but there was your little bit of banter for the day because it was important.
It was just shout outs and appreciation.
Love it.
Just given out in this holiday
season.
Give
me my horrible Louisiana case.
Okay. Thanks to Addie for this suggestion and for the support of our work. She is who suggested this case for us today. Megan, before we get started, let's shake that gree-gree though. Thank you to everybody who has sent us gree-gree.
All right, I think we got to go. It was a quick one today.
That was a louder duck than I anticipated.
As one will have with ducks.
Once in a while.
All right.
They're willy-nilly. This is the case of Jori Lirette, a disabled child that was murdered by his father. There was a lot of public opinion at the time that this case was taking place in 2011, and soon you'll understand why. Jori Lirette was born 3 months premature on April 8th, 2004, to parents Jesslyn Lirette and Jeremiah Lee Wright in the quiet town of Thibodaux, Louisiana. Jori was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and heart problems right from birth that would require lifelong care. Jori was only able to be fed through a feeding tube and was permanently wheelchair bound. As a former CPS worker, I can tell you that the risk of being a victim of child abuse greatly increases for disabled children. Life is not easy for Jori or his parents, undoubtedly. To top things off, Jesslyn and Jeremiah did not have a healthy relationship. By 2011, when this case takes place, the couple had been together for about 10 years, but there were plenty of instances when the police had been called to the home for domestic violence, which never resulted in either person pressing charges, but 911 calls were made. We know it escalated to that point.
Yep, and it's just the perfect time to make the statement that it doesn't matter whether there's ever prosecution in those cases. Exposure to domestic violence has been proven to be more damaging to a child and their brain than parents who abuse substances. We have the data to support it, and I've seen the cases. And that's why we have removed children from domestically violent situations before, even though we never want to, because we don't want to murder our children. And I always have sympathy for mom as a victim in these cases most of the time, not to be sexist, but 99% of the time. But you also can't put your children at risk of harm either. Right. So you've identified a couple of things that are super concerning right off the bat.
Big risk factors.
We have a premature baby, a child. We have significant probably delays, especially physical delays.
Yes.
And we have a domestically violent home.
Yes.
Okay.
All the risk factors. We have them.
You haven't told me substance abuse yet.
No. To my knowledge, that is not.
Great.
That's
well,
really the only
then the
thing.
other big three.
Yes.
The third. I made up a word.
The big third.
Red third. I'm just rapping now.
In 2011, Jori was 7 years old and a second grade student at South Thibodeau Elementary School. His teachers and classmates alike loved Jori, who was mostly unable to speak with the exception of a few words, so he's nonverbal. Add that to a risk factor. But he often communicated through facial expressions. Principal Diane Smith spoke fondly of him, saying, quote, "Everybody loved him. Even though he could not express in words his feelings to us, he did it with his smile," end quote. Some of Jori's favorite things in life were the taste of cherry lollipops, root beer, ice cream, and chocolate chip cookies.
So freaking normal and adorable, but he is a kid who's going to get joy out of sensory experiences.
Yep. His eyes would light up at the sight of bright colors, and his family said that he loved all kinds of animals. If you've ever had any experience with individuals who require feeding tube nourishment, you know that keeping weight on their body is difficult. Jori weighed about 50 pounds, and this was not due to neglect, but circumstances of his condition. He was seen regularly by doctors. For his mother, Jesslyn, Jori was the center of her universe. She was quoted saying, "He was my star. He was always the top priority in my life," end quote. Now we're going to arrive at August 14th, 2011, where this case really starts. There was a man walking down a residential street in Thibodeau when something happened that I think is a lot of people's worst fear. He sees something strange and he decides to take a closer look because as humans, we just can't help ourselves and curiosity freaking gets us.
I agree. It would be me. I would do that. I say I wouldn't. I've seen all of the horror movies, but it would be me.
I know you would. Just outside a modest single-family home, there was an object lying on the ground. The man realizes that it was a human head. Shocked and horrified, he dials 911. So trigger alert, you guys, to everything terrible.
It's not even severe child abuse. There's literally murder, decapitation, dismemberment. I'm
yeah.
Wow.
So the panicked 911 call indicates that there's a discovery of a human head. So when police first arrive on the scene, they're likely expecting to see an adult human head. Or some might even be holding on to the hope that the caller was confused and it was a mannequin, because that does happen pretty frequently, right?
God, I hope that if I ever run across something like that, it's a mannequin.
It is a mannequin. I had a situation in a hotel room last week where there was somebody lying on the floor and I was hoping that they weren't dead. They weren't, but when I walked up to him, I thought to myself, this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is the moment that I find the dead body.
I'm going to be on Crime Curious.
Yep. No, they had vomited upon themselves and were face down, but luckily she was alive.
Oh,
I got her taken care of. Yes. But still, it does. These situations do happen and you're like, please don't be the worst. Please don't be the worst. Unfortunately, in this case, this is the worst.
It was not a mannequin's head.
It was not a mannequin, and it also was not an adult.
Okay.
The police discover it's not just a human head, it's a child's head, left carelessly in the driveway near the road of this home. So police knock on the door of the home, and they find Jeremiah Lee Wright covered in blood. He answers the door, covered in blood.
Oh my God, has this guy had a fucking mental break?
Well, this is where it's going to get judicially interesting.
Okay.
Well, I'm interested to know your opinion.
Well, we just recently had a case similar where if the person was crazy or on some type of a bender, is there a point where they call and ask for help? I mean, he is standing there, willingly opens the door covered in blood.
Covered in blood.
And
he was calm.
His child's, trigger alert, his child's head is in the driveway.
Sure is. Yeah. And you'll find out why here in a minute. He was calm, as if nothing had happened, and was not disturbed at all. He made zero attempt to clean anything of what he'd done really up. I mean, there are some things that I will get to, but in terms of actual cleaning, so that police can't find forensic evidence? No. I mean, as you stated, he left a big portion right out in the open for everyone to see.
Okay, so I want to get the legality straight. He opens the door when law enforcement knocks and lets them in.
Sure does.
Okay.
Lets them in. He's covered with blood.
Then what happens?
Makes no attempt to flee. He makes no attempt to resist arrest because they come into the home, and inside the home, they discover the whole story of what had recently taken place. And in the trash can, officers find what remained of Jori's small body.
In the house?
In the house.
The trash can in the house?
In white bags. Just white, regular trash bags. They find his lower body, his legs, and one forearm. And there's another bag that contained his torso. Another bag that contained a foot and a hand. So they're just in separate bags, but they're in the garbage in the home. So Jori's mother, Jeslyn, was not at the home at the time. She had left approximately 30 minutes to an hour. The time is different depending on the information that I was reading.
Because how long did it take him to murder and dismember his child? Was she there?
Well, keep in mind, he's only 50 pounds, so he's quite small. He's 7 years old, but he's quite small. She left prior to the murder to take her truck to the repair shop to have some small repairs done.
Is that her version?
No, she really did.
Well, I'm just saying it was corroborated then. Like, I'm assuming the dad agrees as well that she wasn't there.
Yeah, no, this is what the dad is telling police too. Yeah, she wasn't home.
All right.
We get the whole story. Don't worry. Jori had a doctor's appointment in 2 days. Okay. And so mom wanted to make sure the repairs were done on time to take him safely to his doctor's appointment on the truck. Prior to her leaving the home, though, she and Jeremiah had argued once again, which was a pretty common thing in my understanding. And Jeslyn had informed Jeremiah that she was leaving him. Some sources said that she was planning to leave the home. Others claimed that she was going to kick the unemployed Jeremiah out of the home. So either way, once again, we have a risk factor, right? We have an already domestically unstable relationship, and now one partner is saying they are leaving. We know that this increases the risk for violent crimes.
Right. And not just to the victim, but often to children and or pets.
Yes. When Jeslyn got home, she discovered the drive and the home to be blocked off in crime scene tape and police vehicles.
Worst
I know. When she identified herself, a police captain and another officer who had 12 years experience as a minister told her that her son had been killed and dismembered and that Jeremiah was the main suspect.
Holy crap.
At the family home, forensic experts were called. They found evidence to suggest that Jori had been, trigger alert to some pretty gruesome details here, had been decapitated over the kitchen sink with a meat cleaver. I'm telling you these details because it is important for what comes up in the ultimate...
In the trial?
Yes, and in ultimately how this case ends up. Okay, so we don't always give these type of details, but here we are. It is important.
Did they have a cause of death prior to the dismemberment and decapitation?
Yes, blunt force trauma to the head.
Okay.
Yep.
That's typical.
Yep. So Jori's body was transported to the medical examiner's office where it was found that he'd been bludgeoned, decapitated, and dismembered. He had been hit with a heavy object with such force that it had caused excessive bleeding on the brain. So let's talk about Jeremiah's statements to the police.
Oh, let's.
After being arrested, which he did not resist, he waived his right to an attorney and made a full and detailed confession of the murder of his son. He told detectives on the morning of the murder that Jeslyn had left the home to have her truck repaired so that she could take Jori to the doctor later. He said that he killed Jori about 30 minutes after Jeslyn left the home. He said that he had left Jori's head outside the home so that Jeslyn would see it when she arrived back home.
Wow.
He said that he, quote, wanted her to feel stupid when she saw the head, end quote.
Feel stupid?
For threatening to leave him, in my opinion. That's what I think that statement is about.
The only reason she's probably been with you this long is because of that child.
For sure. Oh, he's 7. They've been together about 10 years.
This is sick.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's not.
I know.
That is not.
These are details I want you to know.
You guys, you would almost say that that's unbelievable, that excuse, but I fully buy it. I fully believe what I'm hearing right now is that this domestically violent person was so evil that this is what he killed their child to get to her.
Yes.
And this is what could happen in DV situations, people.
And this is why this statement right here is exactly why I don't buy anything of what he says later and how this case ends up. That's my personal opinion. Okay.
You're setting me up to be angry.
I know. I'm setting us all up to be angry collectively, but that's why we do brain baths at the end, so we can come back together in harmony. Okay? Because there's not any in this case. In several articles that were released directly after this hit media, the media reported that the police said in his confession, Jeremiah said that he was tired of taking care of Jori, okay? That Jeslyn was always gone from the home, leaving him to be the primary caregiver for the child.
Because he didn't have a job.
That's exactly it. Oh, don't worry. I've written some statements in there about that. Thank you.
Someone has to provide for the family, and you're unemployed. And you know what? Having to take care of a full-time developmentally disabled and physically disabled child is hard, and maybe there needed to be a permanent caregiver at the home. It had to have been one of you if you couldn't afford to hire one, or your insurance or the government didn't cover it.
Don't worry. We talk about states pay disability benefits. I get into all that because that statement pissed me off. She's gone all the time, and I have to take care of my own child.
How dare
You're not babysitting, dude. You're a caregiver. This is your son.
And he had an option here, because if things weren't good at home and he didn't want to have that obligation, he could have walked away, got divorced, and gave up custody of the child. Still have been ordered to pay child support because you'd be a fucking deadbeat. But still,
right?
You didn't have to stick around.
Sure didn't.
Especially if you were going to become violent. You can leave.
Oh, and we'll get to how he was when Jori was born too. But anyway. One article even quoted a friend of Jeremiah, remember this is a Jeremiah sympathizer, saying the same thing, that he was alone with Jori with Jori and had to care for him all the time, and Jeslyn was gone from the home even when not working. Okay, so she's not allowed to leave the home unless she's working, apparently.
I don't know. If your ass is getting beat at home, wouldn't you want to stay away as much as possible?
I know, and I know what people would say to that. Why would you leave your child alone?
Well, you shouldn't have.
Right.
But hindsight's 20/20, and at some point in time, people who are being abused, there is a self-preservation piece that comes in there as well. I have seen women walk away from homes and leave children there with the abuser because they needed to get to safety first. And is it admirable? Probably not. But is it okay? Yeah.
And some of them believe that they won't take their anger out on the children because when they're in the home, it's only them that are being beaten up on.
Of course, because most victims of domestic violence have never been actually trained on what the power and control wheel is and what to expect and the things that could happen, because they're living in fright, fight, or flight.
Exactly. So remember when I said that he was unemployed? States pay disability benefits to families in this situation. So one parent can stay home and care for a disabled person that requires 24/7 care.
I used to work in that line.
Yes. His job was to care for Jori.
So he was receiving a stipend and compensation to stay home and care for his child.
But Jeslyn made entirely different statements that although she did work outside of the home caring for another disabled person, she was paid to pay for another disabled person, because that's what paid their bills. She was the breadwinner of the family. Jori was her number one priority. And although she had been with Jeremiah for the last 10 years, she had been plotting to leave him for some time. She was quoted saying, "I didn't get out fast enough."
I feel,
like you said, hindsight is always 20/20.
I feel terrible for her because, again, working with victims in these cases, there is a plan, and sometimes it's a long-term plan. And domestic counselors and advocates and shelters support those plans because we want them to do things safe.
Yes.
And to do things in a safe manner. And it sometimes might be a long-term plan of how I'm getting out, doing it slowly.
Yes.
So I think she probably was following a plan. And now she has this terrible, awful regret because the unthinkable happened.
Now, the police had been called to the family's home a month before this event because the two had gotten into a fight about money. But ultimately, as I stated before, neither one of them pressed charges. Nothing came about it. And that was that. Now, and Jeremiah Wright had also been arrested a few times in the past before for things like theft. Okay. And I think there was an assault charge. I didn't make note of it.
Well, the assault doesn't surprise me at all. And neither does the theft if you're talking about more of a low-income household where they were making do off of government paid, what'd you call it? Disability benefits, basically.
Yes. Yes. And I retract that. None of the charges were violent in nature.
Oh, it wasn't
so
assault.
It wasn't assault.
So theft.
It was theft, but there was another thing too, and I cannot remember what it was at this point in time. So
we'll get there.
Yeah. Some other sources, and what becomes a major theme in this case, is that during the confession, Jeremiah made statements that he believed his son was replaced by a CPR dummy. Okay.
When did that statement get made?
After the statement that he was tired of taking care of his child.
But during the first interview?
That part is unclear to me. I don't want to state factually, because essentially what happens, Megan, is the articles that I could locate and the information I could locate from right after this event happened, the narrative was from the police that this man made a full confession and that he was tired of taking care of his child. Then, as the case progresses, now we're seeing, I could tell the way the narrative was shifting based on the media coverage. And all of a sudden, the narrative becomes that his son was being replaced, that he thought his son was being replaced by a CPR dummy. And then, closer to the time of actually making a decision if he's competent enough for trial or not, it changes from CPR dummy to, well, a better description would be robot. Okay? So what troubles me in my research is that I could tell over time through the articles and court documents, I could see this narrative switch from he decapitated his son and this was a domestically violent situation and he was sick of caring to his disabled son. His partner was threatening to leave him and he wanted to show her, by killing their son and making her feel stupid, that all of a sudden, oh, I thought it was a CPR dummy. And wait, no, not a dummy, a robot.
The only thing that makes sense of that is when you actually get to the point of committing the act, maybe you do desensitize yourself by convincing yourself that after you've murdered your child and need to dispose of them, I can picture them as a CPR dummy or a robot as, they're bleeding into your sink.
Yeah, sure. I get into the psychology part of things a bit as well here in a little while, but just know that I could see this progression and it was really bothering me. We know that the morning of the murder, Jori defecated and urinated on Jeremiah.
Well, duh.
Right. Something that he told the police was further evidence for him to indicate that his son was a CPR dummy.
Yeah, because they urinate and defecate.
Yeah, which
happens with CPR dummies that are inanimate
sense.
All the time.
Makes no sense whatsoever. But you know what it does make sense for? Risk factors of abuse. You're angry that you were urinated and defecated on after having a fight with your partner and she's telling you that she's leaving you. And if she leaves and takes Jori and you're no longer caring for Jori, or kicks you out and you're no longer caring for Jori, you no longer have any income, any sustainable living.
He's also taken a human life and is desensitizing himself, and hopefully he's hoping others around it by making statements about, he's made him into an inanimate object.
Mm-hmm. I like that you keep using that word because that becomes a very important piece of information here in a little bit.
It's like I do this for a living.
It's almost like you always know what's in my notes and you don't. You can't even see them.
I had no idea what this case is.
Remember, he claims that he dismembered the child to prove that he was in fact a CPR dummy or a robot and not a human. And he claimed that inside he found styrofoam where there should be joints. So in other words, bone. Okay. I think that we can see where the defense is going to go with this.
Well, yes, we're setting up an insanity defense and a competency issue in the immediate.
Correct. As police continue their investigation, Jesslyn told detectives not only about her recent plans to end their relationship, but that Jeremiah had talked about killing Jori before. In a sworn statement from September of 2004, Jesslyn had said that Jeremiah Wright wanted 6-month-old Jori dead. She said he called her saying, quote, he was tired of seeing the baby suffer and wanted him dead, and that I needed to do something about his suffering and end it all, end quote.
Okay.
Jeremiah then hung up, but he called back and told Jeslyn he loved her, but still, quote, felt the same way about the baby, end quote. So we have attachment issues here. Clearly, we knew that anyway because he ended up taking this child's life. But right from the get-go, he is not happy. The reality here, you guys, is that this man is not happy that he has a disabled son.
No, he wanted to, in his opinion there, almost commit a euthanasia type of issue.
Yeah.
Like he's making it sound like, the child is suffering, right?
Right, the child suffering. That's how we justify actions in our mind.
Right, so again, he's desensitizing himself to the situation with his child. And I know it is so hard in this situation to not be a little bit judgmental to mom, who again is in a bad situation, but a normal individual in a relationship where they had power and control would not be okay with continuing on with a partner who wanted their child dead, and could have, if this again was a normal situation, or where a situation where she had power and control, that she could have ordered to keep him away.
Right. And we don't know her. I don't know her mental capacity. I don't know her life experience. Just speaking from social work experience, I am feeling as if she was probably socioeconomically disadvantaged, that she probably was educationally disadvantaged, and that she may not have had familial resources and support to help her raise this child other than his father, who rightfully so should be helping care for him 24/7 as well.
It's true, because we have this privilege that is an economic privilege almost, where you just make the assumption, or even an intelligence level, you make the assumption that people know or should have known. Because realistically, what should have happened in that situation, even if she wasn't safe, is that she should have told the pediatrician, she should have told the doctors, dude, my husband made a comment about how the baby was suffering and that he would be better off dead.
Right.
Well, then you've notified somebody.
Yeah.
They can tell you that that's not, in fact, the case,
That's
or
just
explain
it. Like,
things to
can
you.
we educate what this child is really going through, and what is, his perception of reality, and that it's not a state of suffering just because he's different, right? And give that opportunity. They probably would have called it into CPS.
Of course.
Had CPS investigate, of
and
course.
appropriately, because it doesn't mean the baby's going to get removed from a loving mom. It
No.
means perhaps some education could be provided, prevention services put in place. And at that point, maybe dad could have just received some education if he truly thought the baby was suffering. We know that that's not the case because of what ultimately happens. But if there is a situation where you had a dad who has a baby and the baby's delayed like this, and he thinks to himself, or even accidentally says out loud, well, maybe the baby'd be better off dead. Well, it doesn't necessarily indicate intent to kill, by the way.
No, right.
In that moment, what it does indicate is somebody is in a mental health crisis, needs some additional education and some assistance in making a decision as to what kind of a part they're going to take in that child's life, if any.
I think he also could have benefited from resources that would have helped with social emotional bonding. He clearly did not have a bond and attachment to this child.
Well, you mentioned it twice, and so did I, that he is making statements to show that there's no attachment and desensitizing himself to what had occurred.
Yep. So we maybe would have had a different outcome, but I don't even know where they live, if those type of resources would have even been readily available.
I'm familiar with the Thibodaux area, and no, that's a lot more rural. But a lot of places, it wouldn't, even if they did have the opportunity to make those referrals,
they probably wouldn't have participated or had the resources to do so.
Exactly.
They're in my understanding, they are a 1-vehicle household.
Sure.
That vehicle wasn't reliable. So
mom used it to go to work to make the money.
Yep. So, their home after this tragedy happened kind of became a makeshift memorial that grew with each passing day. People who knew and loved Jori and strangers alike brought down candles and toys and cards of condolences, which eventually extended 5 feet beyond each side of the house. On August 22nd, there were 500 people that came together for a candlelight vigil in Pelter Park in Jori's memory. Jeslyn emotionally read aloud a letter to her son and said, in quote, "In heaven, they say there is no pain, no illness. People say you're walking up there now, and I believe them. I just can't wait to see it myself," end quote. So I think in her mind, she's really hoping, and he is, not how he was on this earth. Yeah. Jori's funeral was the next day after the vigil at St. Genevieve Catholic Church. It was an open casket, with Jeslyn commenting that the funeral home did a good job. They made him look like he was just sleeping. He was dressed in a red and gray shirt over a white long-sleeve turtleneck. I know. I was really surprised to read that as well.
Some people, that is a very important part of their religion and their closure. And will take, do an open casket at all costs, really.
Yep.
Caught me off guard there now.
Yes. Well, I wanted to include this. There's an above-ground crypt, okay? And what was inscripted on it. Well, yeah,
because they're in Louisiana. I've seen those graveyards. They're beautiful, but they can't, because of the water level, they can't bury anybody underground.
Right. But on it was engraved the words, quote, "No words, just a smile," end quote, which is so perfect for him.
That was him. He never spoke words. No. He just smiled.
Yep. On August 27th, Jeremiah was charged with first-degree murder. Due to the CPR dummy comments and the fact that throughout the police confession, Jeremiah kept referring to Jori as, quote, "the dummy," his defense attorney, Carrie Kukia, I don't know. I don't care. Carrie. I'm just going to call her Carrie because it might be Kusia. I don't know. She requested, or Carrie could also be a male's name, I shouldn't assume, requested a competency evaluation.
That's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I would have too.
Sure.
Defense, you have to cover your butt.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
And it happens to me every day. If
this.
Somebody's acting bizarre, making statements that don't make sense, acting in a manner that causes you to believe they might not understand the severity of the crime, the consequences, or they can't participate in their own defense, all good reasons to ask for a competency, and any normal judge would grant it, and I'm assuming this one did too.
So, yes, so we have this competency evaluation to determine if he's competent enough to stand trial. To me, referring to, during the police confession, him referring to Jori as the dummy, I still, in my opinion, believe that to not be, I believe it to be a disassociation and a dehumanizing.
Or even a double entendre.
Yeah.
I mean, is he referring to his child as the dummy, and had he done it before? Because
yes, he truly had issues with this child being different, and in his opinion, not as intelligent, not as capable. And so to me, that is more of a domestic abuse than it is a sign that he is mentally incompetent.
Well, I don't know that he saw the child as human.
No, I agree. All right, so now we enter the part of the case where years pass as experts in the psychiatry field evaluate Jeremiah to make this determination that was requested.
So if years are passing, then that means that he was found incompetent but possibly restorable, and they spent some time trying to make him restorable. And then,
he was held. He wasn't free during this time.
No, correct. They're not.
No. All but 2 doctors were on board with agreeing that Jeremiah was not mentally capable of standing trial. The 2 that were not in agreement were found to be not reliable, according to the articles that I read. But I say that with a grain of salt because I couldn't find any information to tell us why they were said to not be reliable. Was this an issue with their medical license, or was it a simple fact that they did not agree with the other medical professionals, and so that in itself was deemed as not reliable?
No, what it sounds like to me is that they weren't probably using regularly relied upon medical methods. So in those cases, sometimes there's like agreed upon normal standards for certain types of things when they're assessing.
Yep.
And if the majority of the therapists, psychiatrists, whoever the assessors were, agreed and followed a very specific evidentiary standard, and the other 2 perhaps were using some type of a study that didn't meet regular standards for evidence, they might have been excluded, or they might have decided that they weren't reliable just based off of how they did the assessments. It doesn't mean that they weren't competent. It doesn't mean that they were, going to be, lose their licenses or something.
Yes. So a major reason why medical professionals took so long to determine if he was capable of standing trial was because he was diagnosed initially with suffering from Capgras delusion. And Capgras delusion is a psychiatric disorder in which a person holds a delusion that a friend, spouse, parent, or other close family member or pet has been replaced by an identical imposter. The name comes from Joseph Capgras, who was born 1873 and died in 1950. And he was the French psychiatrist who first described this disorder. The issue with Jeremiah was that he was claiming his son had been replaced by a CPR dummy, which is an inanimate object.
Yeah.
Psychiatrists had not encountered this before. So there was a large debate among whether or not this really could be Capgras syndrome. After much research, they were able to locate very few other cases where this was the situation, and those patients were treated with a Capgras diagnosis, okay? So this is where we see the narrative change through the assessments with the psychiatrist that he was meaning more of a robot than a CPR dummy. So to me, I'm seeing him change his story based on what is going to get him the insanity plea, but I'm not I didn't see the assessments. I don't know that.
His initial statements were CPR dummy. That's what he described it as.
Exactly.
When he didn't come up with robot till later.
No. And so I just, I can see why there was so much debate amongst them of whether or not this diagnosis can really fit him because it was with an inanimate object. And apparently in very, 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 very few other cases in other corners of the world, it's been reported that someone thought that their loved one had been replaced by an inanimate object. But in those, I want to challenge us to think about this. In those cases, was it appropriate for them to have put that diagnosis on that person?
I don't know.
We don't know. So,
but I do know that there were obviously psychiatrists in this case who were able to come to some type of majority opinion that he wasn't able to regain his competence to stand trial, at least up until this point. And the main basis for that being that he apparently lacked some concept of reality in understanding that he had killed his child and not an inanimate object.
Yes. Yep.
That's what they're going with.
That is what they're going with.
Because at some point you have to hope that if someone's truly suffering from that specific disorder, there becomes a moment where they realize that, no, you have in fact murdered your actual child. That child's not here anymore.
Right. Yep. So with this diagnosis, they're saying he can't competently understand the charges against him, and he also can't assist in his own defense. So he was ultimately moved to a mental health facility just north of Baton Rouge. He remained there until August 2012 when doctors said that they believed that he was now competent to stand trial.
Right. So we call that competent but restorable.
Mm-hmm. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity.
Which you're allowed to do. That's the criminal responsibility piece, you guys. That's a separate assessment from competency because you can regain competency, and then there's not guilty by reason of insanity as a potential defense, which means he was never deemed criminally responsible.
Mm-hmm. With his plea of, not guilty by reason of insanity, the sanity hearing was scheduled for January 2013. During the hearing, it was revealed that he had told a prison guard, that he wasn't worried at all about his trial because, quote, because I have a good family and a good lawyer, I'm on easy street, end quote.
Okay.
So during the hearing, more information about Jeremiah's comments were revealed. He had said to detectives that he believed that the CPR dummy was put into his home as a government experiment to reach him, to teach him about life. The judge ultimately ruled that Jeremiah was incompetent and unable to assist in his defense. He was ordered to return to the the State Department of Health and Hospitals and the Eastern Louisiana Mental Health Systems. In February 2014, Jeremiah Wright was ruled not guilty by reason of insanity by State District Judge John LeBlanc. During a court hearing, several experts on mental illness concluded that he was delusional and believed that his son wasn't real and had been replaced by a CPR dummy. It was a rare decision by the judge, and Jeremiah Wright was ordered to the state hospital in Jackson, where he would be held indefinitely. A statement from the judge, simply put, said that he'll remain in the state hospital until the doctors believe that he's no longer a threat to himself or others, and at that time, they'll petition the court for his court-ordered release.
Okay. I know you might find this shocking, but none of that actually surprises me.
Yeah.
Now, do we buy it? I don't know. And I don't know that I can have an opinion on it because I don't have all of it in front of me nor access to his
mental records, right.
and his criminal responsibility pieces. But that is what you typically do in a situation like that. In less serious cases, they actually, at some point in time, so you actually have to keep petitioning them in for mental commitment. And states vary depending on how many months and or years they need to continue to do that to keep somebody locked up. But eventually, if they can regain their competency, then they're released. And oftentimes the charges have been dismissed at that point. And they could, I guess, bring them back if they were dismissed without prejudice. But in this particular instance, it sounds like they have more of an indefinite hospitalization for him. Mm-hmm. And once he does recognize, I don't know what would happen potentially with the charges because I'm not sure what the rules are there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he is still in a mental hospital.
I don't know. As of 2014, that was 10 years ago,
it was.
Megan.
And there's not any updates that we're aware of.
There's been no recent coverage in terms of,
And what happened to Mom? I just wish I knew more. We both do. I imagine she probably lives a pretty private, quiet life, out of the radar.
Imagine. Yes.
Off of the radar, I should say.
She did speak briefly to the media directly after this happened. The family, after the court hearing and whatnot, did say that, they just wished for their own privacy and to be able to grieve and move on from this. They weren't upset about the insanity part of it.
Okay.
I really got the impression from quotes that they had given the media at the time that they just really wanted to be able to grieve Jori in a healthy way and move on with their life and let the judicial system handle Jeremiah as they will.
Here's my soapbox. Justice can happen in a lot of different ways, and it's not always the way that you think it should happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, right.
And in this particular case, you have an individual who clearly is not safe to be out with the public, who, if it's true what his diagnoses are, and if it is true that he is not criminally responsible or not competent by reason of insanity, then this is a person who truly doesn't understand the consequences of his actions, and therefore he is a person who is very, very unsafe to be around any members of the general public, because who's to say that person wouldn't think that a child standing next to them in a store isn't some type of a government-placed robot, resulting in the same type of homicide to have occurred. And it is a homicide. No matter which way you look at it, the killing of another human being is a homicide.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Charnell.
Yeah. Thanks, Addie. For this.
Now my brain's going to work in overdrive, and I'm going to go back and look at all of the cases where I've had competency and criminal responsibilities. I can tell you this much. For as long as I've been doing this job in any capacity, working in law, in any capacity, I don't think I've ever seen that type of a defense before, with the whole not recognizing the person as a human being, inanimate object, whatever it was that you called it. Capgras syndrome. But now I'm going to look it up.
And it is a Dutch name, and it's like Capgras. Yeah, it's
I'm sure that we terribly pronounced the name.
I actually did go to the
you did great with Thibodeau.
The English translation really is Capgras, so it just is what it is. It's Capgras.
Do you think maybe you had just recently watched The Labyrinth with David Bowie, where they replaced the baby with a goblin, like a changeling?
Perhaps. I
don't know.
Did he? Yeah. I think
David Bowie syndrome.
I think there's a part of him that hoped that it wasn't really his child, and it really was.
As he was committing the act.
Yes, exactly. I need a brain bath. You need a brain bath? I know we all need cleansed right now.
Cleanse me.
So, okay. I have a brain bath for you sent to us by Andrea.
Okay.
All right. And it's actually a TikTok. And if you guys follow this lady on TikTok, she's really funny. But when you go to open it, it says, play this video at my funeral. Now my phone is connected to our system here. So when I hit play, it should play the audio for you. You don't really need to see the video other than, I'll show you, Megan. It's just a cute old woman.
Wearing a pink t-shirt.
Wearing a pink t-shirt that said, you're not invited to my funeral.
Okay.
That's what her t-shirt says.
Also, I want that shirt.
And here is her TikTok on funerals.
Who are we giving credit to? Who's TikTok?
At GXJHVN367GH.
There's your credit.
Mm-hmm.
No liability now exists.
This is what was sent to us by Andrea.
This video at my funeral. Thanks for coming, everyone. There's probably a lot of people here, so have fun. If you're crying, stop being a baby. Find a tissue and move on. Don't be sad. I lived a long time. I slayed every day, and now I'm going to lay every day. I hope you slay while I decay. And Bertha better not be here. If she's here, kick her out right now. I'm going to haunt you, Bertha, and my ex-George better leave. I know he's here. I'm going to haunt him, too. I hope everybody gets drunk after this. You better take a shot for me. Love you all.
Andrea, we will do this for you.
will.
If you were to succumb before us, we will do that for you. And we should start saving up bail now, just in case anyone calls the cops. It won't be your husband, though.
It won't. And
well,
if
let's be honest.
Anyone,
she's going to outlive her husband.
Yeah, most certainly.
For sure.
And if there's anyone whose name should be inserted besides Bertha, you just let us know and we will insert that for you.
Absolutely.
Yes. I just thought that was funny. And this
it was
lady
cute
is hilarious.
And not really wholesome, but it felt wholesome to me.
Because she's a cute old lady that's like, listen, I'm dead. I hope that you slay while I decay.
Oh
like,
my God.
She's just funny. Come on.
I hope you all get drunk after this.
Right.
Do a shot for me.
See, that would be us. We're like, stop crying, stop being a baby, move on with life.
Reminds me
I'm
of
fine,
my grandma.
but I am gonna haunt some of y'all, and
Word.
that will
Totally
happen.
gonna happen.
If I go before Brain Bath Jason, you better believe that I'm going to annoy the absolute fuck out of him.
You can annoy me too, by the way. That would be fun though. But
I will, but I'm going to do it in a loving way where you're like, oh, I know that was Charnell.
Yeah.
But for Jason, he's going to be like, wait, was that Charnell? I'm going to leave him thinking about it, you know? Yeah.
Charnell forgets how much younger than Jason and I she
I know.
is. So
yeah,
we know it's probably going to be the opposite.
It would be super tragic, actually, if I went first.
It would be really tragic. Can we not talk about this anymore? I'm getting really uncomfortable.
Oh, sure. Listen, when you're a spiritual being.
I know. You're fine with the afterlife. It's like,
it's okay.
It's going to be just like Beetlejuice. I know it.
It really will. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for listening. If you'd like to join Patreon to binge hundreds of extra episodes, we are there. We're at Crime Curious. Go on to patreon.com/Crime Curious. Google it. You'll find us. The link is also in the show notes. We kind of couldn't have made it any easier for you, to be honest with you.
Go to our website.
Kind of wondering why you're not there already. I mean, truly, guys, keep us on air.
For a month, think about it. You could get a cup of Starbucks or listen to Charnell.
Or a cup of Megan and
little
Charnell.
Voice. Yes.
Right. All right. Thank you all so much. And I said that already, but I'm just going to thank you again.
So freaking thankful.
We're so thankful today. All right. We hope that you keep it curious.
Keep listening.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.